Hi friends, today we will discuss the topic the rise of Islam in Maldives, from Buddhism to Islam. The Maldives, a chain of coral islands scattered across the Indian Ocean, holds one of the most fascinating religious transformations in the medieval history of South Asia, as it moved from being a dominantly Buddhist society to embracing Islam in the 12th century. To understand this transformation, one must examine the geographical position of the islands, the early history of settlement, the long tradition of Buddhism, and the eventual influence of trade, travelers, and Islamic missionaries who reshaped the spiritual identity of the nation. The Maldives, though geographically isolated in appearance, were never truly cut off from the wider networks of the Indian Ocean. Instead, they were strategically located on major sea routes that connected the Arabian Peninsula, East Africa, India, and Southeast Asia. This placement meant that the islands were constantly interacting with sailors, traders, and travelers of different faiths, including Hindus, Buddhists, Christians, and Muslims. The adoption of Islam in the Maldives was not merely a matter of chance or sudden imposition. Rather, it was the culmination of centuries of contact, exchanges, and local transformations that eventually aligned the islands with the Islamic world. The earliest settlers of the Maldives are believed to have arrived from the Indian subcontinent, particularly from regions corresponding to today's Kerala and Sri Lanka. These early communities brought with them elements of Indic culture, language, and religious practices. Linguistic evidence, such as the Divehi language, which is part of the Indo-Aryan family, and archaeological findings point to close cultural affinities with both South India and Sri Lanka. Before the rise of Islam, Buddhism had been the dominant religion in the islands for centuries. The spread of Buddhism from India into Sri Lanka and further into Southeast Asia also found its way into the Maldives, probably between the 3rd century BCE and the early centuries of the Common Era. This was facilitated by the Mauryan Emperor Ashoka's promotion of Buddhism as a state-supported religion and its active dissemination through missionaries. The Maldives thus became part of a larger Buddhist cultural sphere, which included Sri Lanka, southern India, and Southeast Asian polities such as those in present-day Thailand and Indonesia. Archaeological remains across the islands testify to the deep roots of Buddhism in Maldivian history. Excavations have uncovered stupas, monasteries, and statues, particularly in places like Thodu, Gan, and Istu. Large Buddhist mounds and relics show that the religion was not superficial but firmly established as a way of life, shaping the moral and philosophical outlook of the islanders. Moreover, Maldivian Buddhist art reflects stylistic influences from Sri Lanka and India, highlighting cultural interconnections. For several centuries, Buddhism served as the unifying spiritual and cultural identity of the Maldives, even though Hinduism and local folk beliefs coexisted. Despite its Buddhist orientation, the Maldives were never insulated from wider Indian Ocean networks. Arab traders began frequenting the region from the early centuries of Islam, as the Indian Ocean was central to the flourishing maritime trade between the Middle East, India, and Southeast Asia. By the 8th and 9th centuries, Muslim merchants had established strong trading communities along the coasts of Gujarat, Kerala, and Sri Lanka. These same merchants also extended their routes into the Maldives, attracted by the abundance of cowrie shells, which were used as currency in Africa and parts of Asia, as well as dried tuna and coconuts. The Maldives became an essential stopover point for resupplying water and food in the long voyages across the Indian Ocean. The recurring presence of Muslim traders in Maldivian harbors gradually created familiarity with Islamic customs and beliefs among the locals. Over time, these interactions were no longer limited to commercial exchanges but extended into cultural and religious influences. Islam's first impression in the Maldives did not come through conquest or military force but through peaceful means, primarily through trade and missionary work. Unlike the northern parts of India where Islamic expansion sometimes involved warfare, the Indian Ocean islands experienced Islam as part of the fabric of mercantile and cultural networks. Sailors and traders who brought textiles, spices, and goods also brought their daily practices of prayer, fasting, and other rituals, which naturally intrigued the local population. The Maldives' reliance on maritime trade meant that the ruling elites could not afford to ignore the customs and influence of powerful Muslim traders who controlled vast commercial networks across the ocean. This gave Islam a practical as well as spiritual appeal in Maldivian society. The traditional Maldivian account of the island's conversion to Islam is preserved in the national oral history and in texts such as the Tariq and local chronicles. According to these traditions, Islam was formally introduced in the year 1153 CE during the reign of King Dovemi, who later took the Muslim name Sultan Muhammad al-Adil. A well-known legend attributes the conversion to the visit of Abu al-Barakat, a Muslim scholar and traveler, who is said to have persuaded the king and the people to embrace Islam. The story often involves a dramatic narrative of how the islands were plagued by a sea demon or jinn that demanded human sacrifices, and how Abu al-Barakat rid the Maldives of this menace by invoking the name of Allah and reciting verses from the Quran. Moved by this act, the king and his subjects accepted Islam. While this legend carries mythical elements, it reflects the perception that Islam arrived as a liberating and protective force, rescuing the people from old superstitions and offering a new spiritual framework. Scholars have debated the historicity of Abu al-Barakat and the exact manner of conversion. Some traditions identify the figure as Yusuf al-Tabrizi from Persia, while others link him to Morocco. Ibn Battuta, the famous Moroccan traveler who visited the Maldives in the 14th century, mentions that the conversion was attributed to a man from Maghreb, suggesting that North African connections played a role. However, historical analysis also suggests that multiple Muslim missionaries and traders over time may have laid the groundwork for conversion, and the formal acceptance of Islam by the king was the decisive act that transformed the island's identity. The conversion of rulers often had a cascading effect in medieval societies, as subjects followed the religious orientation of their sovereigns, leading to widespread adoption of Islam. Once Islam was accepted, it rapidly became embedded in the political and social structures of the Maldives. The monarchy was redefined under Islamic principles, with rulers adopting the title of Sultan, aligning themselves with the larger Islamic world. Islamic law and jurisprudence began to influence the governance of the islands, and mosques replaced Buddhist temples as the central places of worship. Archaeological evidence shows that many Buddhist sites were either repurposed or abandoned, while new Islamic architecture, such as coral stone mosques, emerged. These mosques, decorated with intricate calligraphy and wood carvings, became symbols of the new faith. The Friday Mosque in Malé, constructed in the 17th century, is a continuation of this legacy, though it reflects centuries of Islamic architectural tradition that began soon after conversion. Culturally, the Maldives' conversion to Islam also meant integration into the intellectual and spiritual currents of the Islamic world. Arabic became an important language of learning and religion, even though Divehi remained the spoken language of the people. The script of Divehi, known as Thana, developed under Islamic influence, written from right to left like Arabic and incorporating numerals and diacritical marks derived from Arabic letters. The Maldives thus entered into the wider Islamic civilization not only in terms of faith but also in language, scholarship, and art. The impact of Islam on Maldivian society was profound and lasting. It provided a new religious identity that was shared with a vast network of lands stretching from North Africa to Southeast Asia. This common faith allowed the Maldives to strengthen its trading relations with Muslim merchants, enhancing its prosperity. Moreover, Islam introduced a new ethical and legal framework that helped unify the islands under a shared sense of purpose and belonging. The memory of Buddhism gradually faded as Islam became the sole recognized religion, and Islamic rituals, festivals, and institutions became central to daily life. The Maldives' unique case illustrates how religion in the Indian Ocean world often spread through cultural interaction, trade, and diplomacy rather than conquest. Its conversion from Buddhism to Islam highlights the adaptability of island societies and their openness to external influences when such changes offered both spiritual resonance and material benefits. Over the centuries, Islam became so deeply rooted in Maldivian culture that it is now considered inseparable from national identity. The constitution of the Maldives even today requires all citizens to be Muslim, a reflection of the depth of this transformation that began almost 9 centuries ago. The rise of Islam in the Maldives also underscores the broader historical processes of the 12th century, a time when Islam was expanding across South and Southeast Asia. Similar conversions were taking place in regions such as the Malay Archipelago, where Islam spread through trade and missionary activity rather than direct conquest. The Maldives thus became part of this larger Islamic maritime network, serving as a link between different regions and cultures. When one considers the legacy of this transformation, it is clear that the Maldivian embrace of Islam was not only a religious shift but also a cultural and political reorientation. The Buddhist stupas and statues that once dotted the islands are now archaeological relics, reminders of a past era, while the vibrant Islamic culture continues to thrive. The Maldives' Islamic identity shaped its literature, law, architecture, and social norms, ensuring that Islam was not a superficial layer but a deeply ingrained part of the island's soul. This journey from Buddhism to Islam was gradual, layered with legend, trade interactions, and royal decisions. It reflects how the Maldives, though small in size, played a significant role in the history of the Indian Ocean and how its transformation mirrors the broader patterns of cultural and religious change that characterized the medieval world. The rise of Islam in the Maldives remains one of the most remarkable episodes in the global history of religious transformation.